Here's Mark and Suzanne revolutionizing radio.
Welcome to another episode of the Mark and Suzanne Show. I am Mark, and she is Suzanne, and we're glad you joined us here on the Cerberus Radio Network today, where we are in the business of revolutionizing radio. Also want to welcome to the program our good friend and senior producer extraordinaire, Jeff Johnson, and he's just does a fantastic job producing all the shows here. Plus, he runs his own show. So we've got a lot going on here at the Cerberus Radio Network, and we are revolutionizing radio. Make no mistake about it. We get emails, we get contacts on Facebook from people all the time thanking us for being here, and thank you for listening. We really are at this kind of crossroads, aren't we, folks, where we do need to think differently about the problems that we face, because obviously doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again is not bringing about the results we all think are going to come from doing that same thing over and over and over again. But at the same time, we recognize it is very difficult to change the status quo. It's a powerful force at work, and we are not unaware. We are very cognizant of the reality of what it takes to actually bring about the kinds of changes we talk about routinely here on the program. So, like I said, I'm glad you joined us again. I'm Mark. She is Suzanne. Suzanne, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's so glad to be back here with you, my wonderful friend. And you were absolutely right. You know, we are talking about stuff that is revolutionizing radio, but, you know, really what we're trying to do is just bring back civility and liberty and the rights that really, if we could go by these principles, would benefit everybody. There's absolutely no need for this contention and violence that we're seeing in the news right now. We ask people to bear with us. Some of this stuff might make you uncomfortable at first, but there's a reason we're trying to get you to rethink this. We talked about this last week, you know, vote Republican. We got to save the House. And I compared this to being in a rocking chair. It's going to give you something to do and keep you busy, but we're really not going to go anywhere. And as we're going to get into the show today, Mark's going to get into the 10 conservative victories and kind of review what's changed since we won the White House, we won the House, we won the Senate, and now we're packing that court with conservatives, ladies and gentlemen. Where is this going to get us? Follow us, by the way, on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. Please, if you're not following Mark Cressland's and reading his posts, are all public, do so. They are very thought-provoking and insightful. I am at the Wasatch Report radio show, the Suzanne Sherman page as well. I have two pages. We try and keep discussions going on both. Jeff Johnson also. We have a fan page, Cerberus Radio, CRN fan page. Find us on YouTube. By the way, did everybody come through the big YouTube apocalypse last night? It was down worldwide for about 30 minutes. We'll get into that as well. We're on SoundCloud Radio Co., where I have shows on there, the Mark and Suzanne Show. Jeff also has his show, The Paradigm Shift. That's a bit on hiatus. He's doing so much behind the scenes for us right now. Mike Meharry has his podcast from the 10th Amendment Center. Also, he does one with Peter Schiff called Shift Gold. By the way, I'm going to be joining him on one of those. We're going to combine a little bit of preparedness realities with gold investments. So that's really exciting. So also we have some of the older shows from the other side. Josh and Justin and Mike, are taking a hiatus to write a book. So we've got a lot of things going on. I also want to give a big shout out to Sweetwater. I bought my radio equipment from them, and their stuff is guaranteed for life. I had an issue with the cable. They sent me another one out free of charge immediately. So big thank you, Oscar, very much, and thank you very much for listening. Mark, let's get into this. Let's talk about the conservative victories we're experiencing right now.
Well, there's so many of them. So, you know, here recently,
Band-Aid's gone.
That's right. One of the things we do here in the radio network, and Suzanne does on her Facebook page, Jeff does on his Facebook page, we do here in the radio, we do in whatever venue we can do it in, is provoke thinking about the status quo. And now sometimes that's hard. And, you know, we deal with a lot of philosophical concepts here on our show. I don't talk much about the Constitution anymore because I think Jeff wrote this last week. It's essentially a dead document. It has no bearing on anything going forward. And the more they can keep us distracted about, well, my view of Article 1, Section 8 is the right view, yours is wrong. And then they come back and say, oh, yeah, well, my view of Article 1, Section 8 is right, and yours is wrong. The more they can keep us connected to that kind of debate, guess what that gives them freedom to continue to do their dirty work. So they love it when we get caught up in Article 6 debates. They're about as happy as can be in Washington, D.C. because what are we doing? Well, we're trying to prove we're right in our interpretation. It doesn't matter whether you're right or not. You know, this weekend, we had a really great kickoff to our organization, Free the States. We had a jam-packed house. My topic was the need for revolution, and revolution requires revolutionary language, but not all revolutions are violent. I made a perfectly clear point. I listed over 30 peaceful revolutions that, of course, you never ever hear about, or you may have heard about it, but it's never emphasized. No, what's emphasized is 1865, Kreslins. That was a revolution of sorts, and people were murdered. And then
that's Texas v. White and Lincoln. They settled that. Stop it.
It's all been settled because of murder. So, you know, I'm challenging. I'm doing that purposely. I'm using the word revolution because it's a necessary word to use right now. It is. There's a revolution going on right now. Actually, it's not being led by the conservatives. That's for certain. It's being led by the Marxist leftists. And they have been in revolutionary posture for 50 years. And guess who's winning? Them. So our job here is to provoke the status quo. We're going to challenge underlying assumptions. I'm going to get on the radio here and say the Constitution doesn't matter a bit right now. Stop debating your particular interpretive model about the Constitution. Did you know that there's sometimes people refer to 7 different models of interpretation that are used to interpret the Constitution, anywhere from originalism to textualism to pragmatism. Guess what the framers of the Constitution forgot to put in the Constitution? How to interpret it.
It was assumed at the time that common sense would prevail, was it not?
And
we're rational thinkers. Let me go back, really quick to interject here, Mark. We have said since we started this, we call this network 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers. And the other day I was in a discussion with somebody and I said, look at the discussions that prevailed at the time and how before we went on a show one time, Mark and I were talking before we went live. And I said, hey, did you catch the interview with Brett Kavanaugh on TV last night? No, how was it? Oh my gosh, it was amazing. They talked about federalism, the proper role of the judiciary, is stare decisis legitimate? And Mark's eyes bugged out of his head, his jaws dropped, and I said, just kidding. They talked about flatulence and his virginity. This is what we have devolved to, folks. And while we like to laugh about it, sometimes we have to call this government out for the farce and that it really is. And, I really like to write articles about the Constitution. The method to my madness is to try to illustrate to people, this is what was intended. And this is where we are now, knowing we will never get back to what was intended, which James Madison had said, well, we're going to interpret it by looking at the ratification debates. Nobody talks about that at the time. So let's understand, if we point this out, we're not getting back to that point. So what can we do? Reaching across the aisle to Marxists is going to get us nowhere. Mark, somebody had said that they've been listening to you for about a year, and they actually realized they were fired for having conservative views. This is what's happening. I think I mentioned I had a friend who just got a new job, moved to a new location, and he posted on his private Facebook page that he did not believe in affirmative action. He felt jobs should be handed out on merit as opposed to your biological sexual identity.
Mm-hmm.
Human resources and her burqa approached him, took him behind the woodshed. He's going to look for another job. They didn't fire him. The CEO actually came to his defense. He was like-minded, but he didn't want to be known at this company as the one the CEO had to rush to defend. They play dirty, folks. They're in it to win it. We need to rise up.
Boy, I'll tell you, there's nothing more truer than that. They are in it to win it. We seem to be in it to make points, to win debates. When there are thousands being murdered every single day, trillions being stolen every year, and we think, oh, well, we won that debate, didn't we? Folks, move away from that. Don't make. I mean, you can go ahead. Obviously, you're free to do what you want to do. But on my Facebook page, certainly, I don't make constitutional arguments anymore. I don't even listen to them. I don't make any. They make no difference to me, because while they may have been thinking with common sense, the reality is 4 short years later, President Apostle Washington seemed to find some magic mumbo jumbo in Article 2 to decide to march 13,000 troops. So if there was common sense on June 21st, 1789, when New Hampshire ratified that document, making it in force, it left June 22nd. The common sense left the next day, because they were about building a infrastructure. And this is why it's important to know who was there. This is why it's important to know what the Federalist motivations were. But be that as it may, it's not hard to discover what their motivations were. And it's when you understand their motivations, it's really not hard to understand the construct of this thing that led to what we have today. Now, people can get as mad at me as you want. And if you're of the mindset that it's a divine document, I'm not going to be able to persuade you off of that. I recognize the futility of trying to make that argument. You're going to believe it's something supernatural, and then you'll just keep believing that until the time comes they take you away. And then on your way to the paddy wagon, on your way to the gulag, you can say, but this is a divine document. Yeah. All that you want. And we'll claim your constitutional right. See if they care. Folks, they don't care now about your constitutional rights. And we still have the freedom here on the Cerberus Radio Network to at least talk about it. Now, that may come a time where that doesn't come for now, right? So here at this meeting this weekend, and I've been doing this fairly regularly now, I've been asking people a very simple question. And because I think honesty and integrity are really important right now. And so it's a very simple question. It's one I asked myself, and really began me on a process of unwinding a lot of this. I asked myself, list the top 10 major conservative policy victories. Now, by policy, I mean something Washington, D.C. is going to do to advance some policy agenda. Now, conservatives have claimed for literally the 40 years I've been following this, proponents of limited government, proponents of ending abortion, proponents of sound fiscal policy, proponents of the Constitution. They've been mouthing these words for decades. And so then you go back and you evaluate, okay, some party X says they're going to do this. Can I find evidence that party X ever won on these policy initiatives, these major policy fronts that they were saying, this is why we are here. We're here for you to do this. Now, when you actually are honest about it, there are no major policy victories that have sustained. Yes, we remember Tommy Thompson in Wisconsin and the welfare reform package that came through the Clinton administration, but that was reversed. That ended up changing back to we're right back to where we were prior, I think 1996, somewhere in that ballpark. So we had a momentary major policy victory, but guess what? It's right back. It's the same thing with Common Core. You may have thought you stopped it in your state. They just retool it under some other name, and they come right back up. So when you are honest, and I've asked people, send me a list of your top 10 major conservative policy victories. And of course, what typically happens is people can't list any. Yet in front of this group the other day, I just whipped off 10, 15 off the top of my head victories by the Marxist progressive leftists. Let's start with a few. The income tax of 1916, get into your pocket. The Social Security, the WPA in the 1930s, the Great Society programs, the War on Poverty programs in the 1960s, the anti-discrimination affirmative action laws that came out during that time, Roe versus Wade in 1973, followed by Casey in 1992. The inability of President Reagan to even stop a stupid little agency like the NEA, the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, Obamacare, Medicare, Medicaid. The Marxist hate crimes legislation, anti-discrimination legislation, privacy violations. The Marxist leftists, I have concluded, Jeff and Suzanne, I have concluded that every time they get on the battlefield to advance one of their major policy victory issues, they win. We are 0-4-10. They are 10-0. Now, this is why honesty and integrity is important in this fight. Because here's what the GOP has done. And honestly, this is what most Republicans, conservative, Christian conservatives have done. They've redefined what winning means. Well, Kreslins, we know the Marxists have won all those, but so have we. Oh, yeah. Here's how we've won, Kreslins, you big dummy. Here's how we've won. We got Donald Trump elected. We took back the House from the Democrats.
But wait, the budget, we say, oh, he's better than Hillary. Shut up. You and Sherman, knock it off.
So, and then we redefine winning another way. Here's what winning means to the conservative. Kreslins, you big dummy, don't you understand? They went for 100% win. They only got 80%. We stopped them from getting 100%. Kreslins, how can you not see that's a victory? Now, folks, I'm a little animated about this stuff to drive home the point. That is actually what happens out there on Rush Limbaugh every day, Sean Hannity every day. Oh, we're winning. Why? Because we got Republicans in the Congress. Oh, yay, Limbaugh. Way to go, Sean.
It's never been more difficult and burdensome to purchase a firearm than it has been right now under this Trump administration. Thank you to the NRA as well. I want to interject here also with comment from our listener, Michael Coolidge. Reduce the debt from $23 billion to $16 billion. Yeah, we kind of like the Chicago Cubs, one national championship in 100 years, but we are awesome.
Well, folks, we're trying not to be too irreverent today, but there's a certain reality that sometimes it's just better to laugh at some of this stuff than to get your heart rate up or your blood pressure up. But the reality is, this is why we do what we do, not to be, mocking and all that, but to challenge the status quo thinking out there. If you're honest with yourself, all the years you've gone and punched that ballot for the GOP, you honestly know nothing really good has happened. There has been change, that's for sure. It's been all bad change. So just be honest with yourself. Be humble enough to say, I was wrong. Because the minute you get to that point, like the three of us on this network have gotten and others on this network, the minute you're willing to be honest with yourself, now you're able to really put yourself in a position to think of real solutions on how to fix this. And to that comment this morning that you mentioned, Suzanne, I get those with some regularity. I suspect you do as well. Because we are changing minds out there. We are asking people to step back from their emotional connection to the Constitution, to America as a Christian nation, to American exceptionalism. We're asking you to take a step back. Just take a step back and join us in thinking, are those really accurate statements? Well, as I said to some folks this morning, every Wednesday morning I meet with a group of people and we pray about all this. And I met with a group this morning, and I said, what do you normally hear at the end of most politicians' speeches? Either something like this. It goes, and God bless America. May God bless America. May God continue to bless America. Those are usually the variations that you hear. Now, when you're a jingoistic kind of emotional person connected to the idea of American exceptionalism and all the things that comes with that, emotions well up in your heart, and you start clapping like everybody else in the room is doing, and you think, well, yes, God bless America. Now, this is what it means to take a step back and think with the brain God gave you. Would the God of the universe, the holy, righteous God of the universe, who penned in Exodus the 10 commandments, 2 of them being, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, and you shall have no other gods before me. With the God of the universe in heaven looking down at the exceptional American Union, would he honestly be up there saying, you guys are killing it, man. I am going to continue to bless you. When we murder 3,000 of his creations every single day, this government steals billions every single day. How can you reconcile the politician on the platform who just gave this stunning speech about lower government, lower taxes, ending abortion, obeying the Constitution, whatever their little rhetorical points are? You get all ginned up in your emotions. It's like, yes, we finally got one. He's going to do it. He's going to do it. And then he closes after he senses the crowd is with him, and he's reading the crowd, and they're all, yes. He says, and may God bless America. How can you reconcile that with a God who is not going to bless America? Because we have the blood of innocent image bearers on our hands. Folks, am I wrong?
Mark, this is a really unpopular thing to say, but it's a slap in the face we need. Do you remember the indignation over the revelation of Reverend Jeremiah Wright's speech about whether or not God blesses America?
Yeah.
I'm starting to think maybe there is a little bit of truth to what he was saying. As unpatriotic as that may sound, how do you reconcile that with what we are doing? How do you reconcile that with these never-ending wars? Go ahead.
Here's how you reconcile it, Suzanne. And we're all familiar with the abused spouse syndrome. So here's wife or husband, comes home, checks the laundry basket. Wife or husband has lipstick on the collar, has the smell of perfume, has odd charges on their credit card. And we confront our spouse and we say, what is this? And they say, well, I didn't mean it. It was an accident. I'll never do it again. That is how we reconcile it with these hacks we call politicians. We say, yeah, they did wrong, but at least they weren't as bad as my neighbor's husband or wife. So it's not all that bad. My spouse is still bringing home a paycheck. We still are planning our vacations. Yeah, I know he or she has cheated, made some mistakes, but we all make mistakes after all. And so I should just keep going on. My sister was an abused spouse. She would say those things for literally years. So I have intimate firsthand knowledge of how that game works. Well, folks, you're being abused by this government, massively abused. And you're listening to them whisper in your ears, just like the cheating spouse does. I'll never do it again. Or next time I'll do better.
Here's another one, Mark. We blame ourselves. Hey, it's not the Constitution. We failed the Constitution. Maybe if I'd been a better wife, if I'd taken care of myself, maybe if I was a better cook, he wouldn't have done this. Folks, this isn't our fault.
No.
You have to stop blaming yourselves. And this is what we're doing. Mark, we've talked about digging a little bit deeper and looking at the holy parchment itself and finding the flaws that really paved the way.
Yeah.
like John the Baptist did for good, the Constitution we have to come to the terms with is probably paving the way for evil. There's no clause in there telling us how to interpret it, nor is there any clause in there saying what happens if these politicians violate the oath that they're supposed to take when they get into office.
Suzanne,
no enforcement clause. Justices on the Supreme Court serve for life during good behavior. What is good behavior? They violate the oath, yet there they sit, and they have since before the ink was dry.
Suzanne, you know this, and it just crossed my mind when you said what you said. Perfect commentary, by the way.
Thank you.
In most pieces of legislation that have some kind of financial or social impact, prior to the explanation of the legislation, there is a section called definitions. It defines certain words that are going to be used within the context of that legislation so that people know crystal clear how to interpret that, how to interpret what that word meant when used in Section 2, Clause B. Notice what's absent, as you just alluded to in the Constitution. There is no definitions of any of it. Any of it. None of it is defined. Now, if people want to point to Madison's statement about the ratifications are supposed to be, you're supposed to use the ratifications to define what the Constitution. But says who? What's the penalty for me not doing that? Okay, all right, James. I agree. We should use the ratification debates to define what was meant in the Constitution. But you know what? I don't want to. I don't want to use ratification. I want to use.
Doesn't have to. I don't either.
Exactly right. So then, who does what? What's the punishment? Yet, in a piece of legislation that offers definitions for words that are going to be used within that legislation, that's going to change everything. You have an anchor point to say, no, this is what you meant, because in Section 1. Definitions, you described life as 4 paragraphs, what life meant. Now you're violating that, and you're in violation of that legislation yourself. Now you at least have a concrete point to argue. Right now, I see this, and you see this, Jeff and Suzanne, all the time. Right now, people argue thinking that their interpretive model is the interpretive model. I see this with originalists all the time, myself being an originalist if I cared about it. I make originalist interpretations. Heck, how many of us made arguments that Ted Cruz is not eligible to be the president of the United States based on an originalist interpretation? I know many people did. Did it prevail? But we're right, Kreslin. Says who?
Who
says
cares?
Who?
Who cares? He's a conservative. We don't care.
Yeah, he's Ted Cruz, and that's what matters. And so, folks, we're going to be honest on this network about the situation we're in. I'm not afraid to call Washington, D.C. evil. I'm not afraid to do as Suzanne just did and say there are major problems in the Constitution that actually contributed to the mess we're in right now. I am not going to blame the people, and I'm not going to be an abused spouse that says, well, you know, maybe I should trust them one more time. I'm just not going to do it. And if that drives us down to 4 listeners and 3 of them are on the network talking right now, well, then so be it. It drives us to 3 listeners. I don't personally think that's the case. I honestly think, Suzanne and Jeff, there are millions of people waiting for this message that we're talking about. I see it in the state of Oklahoma. I saw it in the Fisher campaign when 36,000 people, nearly 36,000 people went to the polls and voted for a guy who essentially said, I'm going to abolish abortion in this state when I'm governor, and I'm going to do it by punching Washington, D.C. in the face. Now, 36,000 people heard that and said, I want some of that. That's what I want. I don't want to be an abused spouse anymore. I don't want to just debate a unresolvable debate, but it actually is resolved. It's resolved by the Marxist leftists who have said, no, government's a force for good. We're gonna have a war on poverty. We're gonna make sure everybody has health care. We're going to invest in people's future. Yeah, we need to know where you guys are for your safety. You know, folks, you have bought, I have bought literally, you couldn't really quantify it, but you have bought thousands and thousands of lies, just like I have. And I don't anymore. There is almost nothing anybody can say who is in elected office that I now believe.
This whole debacle with the Affordable Care Act, this is how they win. They cloak their ideas under something that really sounds good. This goes back to the New Deal era. We know this. Millions of Americans are being denied health care. No, they're not. What you're misunderstanding is the difference, and there's a significant one, between imposing health insurance upon Americans,
right,
denying them health care. People are unfortunately believing the sound bites. Even, I have to come out and attack our so-called conservatives. They love the snake oil that is being divvied out to them by the so-called mainstream media. Even those that are outside those parameters that you'll hear on YouTube that call themselves constitutional experts, particularly constitutional attorneys that are selling the constitutional snake oil that are leading you to the slaughter. I call these people Judas goats. I'm attacked for doing so, saying, Suzanne, that's a bit harsh. Reality is sometimes harsh.
Yeah, it is harsh, and it comes time for truth. And I'll tell you, folks, that's all we're going to peddle here is truth, because lies are what the Marxist, Leninist, socialist, progressive left lives in. They have no problem using lies. They have no problem murdering. They have no problem deceiving. They have no problem conflating. They have no problem confusing. They have no problem doing any of that. Folks, we can't play the game they're playing. We can't. If you're a moral person, you can't lie to gain your win. If you're a Christian, you are obligated not to lie to gain a win. And you know, the bottom line is, folks, you don't even need to. You just need to be honest about where we are and how to fix this thing. And this thing is not going to be fixed by taking back Washington or running around asserting America is a Christian nation. That may make you feel good. And when you walk into church and you say, well, you meet Brother Jones and you say, well, boy, isn't it great to live in a Christian country? You may feel good at that moment, but it means absolutely nothing in terms of a game plan or a strategy. Absolutely nothing. Number one, you can't prove that. It just makes you feel good. But you can't actually prove America was a Christian nation, because the Constitution was not built on the Bible. All right. Can we just be clear about something? The framers of the Constitution did not sit in the room somewhere and they all brought out their Bibles and say, okay, well, in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 3, we find this passage about the executive branch of government. And it's just not how it went down, folks. Now, people that have earned a great deal of money off of this promotion of this idea will tell you, well, if you can't see the Bible and the Constitution, then you don't know your Bible. You know, I do know my Bible pretty doggone well. And I can tell you, it ain't in that document. It ain't anywhere in there. And that's not wrong. That's not right. And that's not wrong. The Bible isn't prescriptive about a form of government. Can anybody tell? Show of hands. All right. Show of hands. Wish Greg Carpenter was here so we could bring up the video cameras. We could see what you all are doing. By a show of hands, how many of you believe that God laid out a prescriptive form of government? In other words, he sat up in heaven and said, you know what? All right, to all of my followers down there on earth, here's what I want. Here's the form of government I want you to have. And I'm going to write it in Lamentations chapter 4. And how many of you can point to that passage where God did that? And of course, the answer, if you're honest, is nowhere. There's nothing in Scripture that prescribes a particular form of government that he desires for his people to live under.
And Mark, so God, recognizing his own fallibility, made sure they included Article 5. So somewhere down the road,
right,
people wiser and smarter than the King of Kings could fix his mistakes.
Right. That's a great point. Had me a little scared there when you talked about God's fallibility. It's like, oh no, where are we going? But I totally get what you're saying. Yeah. So God,
crazy. I think they might be right.
So that's an excellent point
there, Suzanne.
What's that?
And Suzanne needs a little more coffee.
Yeah, clearly. We're all kind of in this giddy mood this morning. I'm not sure exactly why, but I'd rather be there than sometimes the dark places I go when I'm thinking about where we are. But that's an excellent point. So God writes the Constitution through the Bible, but Article 5 is in there just in case he got something wrong. So, folks, yeah, we're laughing about this, but there's a real thread of deeply serious truth about this as well. And it's important that you step back. Now, Jesus actually did give us instruction of what to do. It's found in the book of Matthew, chapter 22, the Great Commandment. He says, the God of the universe says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and, begins with the letter M, mind. Mind. God gave us this wonderful thing we call a brain in our heads. It's different than the rest of the animal kingdom, with dogs who can express great deals of love and obedience, but they don't think. They don't stop and think. Chickadee birds don't wake up and say, well, I think I'm going to create an air conditioner today. They don't have the brain capacity to do that. No other creation in the animal kingdom is able to think like we can. We have the capacity to think amazing things. And yet when it comes to this government, somehow we just shut it off and say, well, Kreslins, it's a Christian document. It's a Christian nation. Will you just get it through your thick head that's what's going on. That's where we live right now. Will you please just get it through your thick head and stop fighting God on this? This is a Christian nation with a divine document. What do you call it? The sacred, Suzanne, what do you call it? What's the word?
The Holy Parchment.
The Holy Parchment. Yes, it's got the Holy Parchment. And Kreslins, if you'll just get on board with us and keep making originalist constitutional arguments, well, in 300, 400, 500 years, we may win.
By then, if you look at how these Marxists have co-opted the education system and the media, and they start from the very beginning in the early years. What did Hillary Clinton say? We have got to get to these kids early. Folks, she wasn't talking about their health care. She wasn't talking about their education. She's talking about their indoctrination. That's how ultimately they are going to win. You need to get your kids out. The public school system. Look at it this way. How many so-called conservatives have their kids in the public school system? Folks, that is socialism. You are not practicing what you preach. Oh, but my wife needs to work. No, she doesn't. It's a matter of priorities. Well, I can't leave California and it's so expensive. Yes, you can.
You did.
Your priorities have to be in order. How many people have that boat with their credit card bills? They're paying a mortgage way beyond what they really need. How many people have that extra car or going to take that vacation at some resort rather than maybe going camping and spending time with your kids? This is how they win. They get us so caught up in the quest for stuff. And the government keeps promising us stuff. Here's a case in point. There's an article that came out by FEE. Mark, you mentioned earlier the war on poverty. This came out just the other day. By the way, if you don't follow FEE, it's the Foundation for Economic Education. Tom Mullen, who's been a frequent and recurring guest on our show, writes for them as well. Poverty in the U.S. was plummeting until Johnson declared war on it. We didn't really have a problem with terrorism either till we declared a war on it as well. What do these wars do? Every single time, expand government exponentially, even the hot wars like we have World War I, World War II, expansion of government exponentially. Does it ever contract to the pre-war status? No.
Never.
Just like the gas prices, they react to whatever some crisis is. They never contract. They always go up. But here's, I'm just going to get really briefly into this article, and then we'll post it so you can follow up on your own. One of the more elementary observations about economics is that a nation's, I don't like the N word, prosperity is determined in part by the quantity and quality of labor and capital. These factors of production are combined to generate national income. He goes on to talk about punitive tax policies that discourage capital. And then again, we have the welfare state's effect on the poor. Folks, LBJ, what he did in the Great Society, and we know that term that he used about getting a certain contingency to vote Democrat Party, this was about the perpetuation, securing their power in perpetuity. If they could say they're there to get you out of poverty, they were doing okay. Now we are all impoverished. Lincoln didn't free any slaves. That war enslaved us all until we understand what secession really meant. By the way, those of you that have to cling to this Constitution, secession is entirely consistent with the Holy Parchment. Nullification is entirely consistent. Oh, but the Supremacy Clause. Suzanne, you're so stupid. The Constitution's the law of the land. Nobody digs deeper and takes the time to educate themselves, and the conservatives are just as guilty. So what are we left with here, Mark? Let's talk about our conservative victories. I submit to you, these are just, it's a pause.
Yeah.
We have a pause right now. This is a speed bump. Do you put the pedal to the metal when you get to a speed bump? You got to find a way around this. And clinging to this document and saying, if we just get back to the Constitution, which we know has set the stage for failure, don't be an abused spouse and say we failed this agreement. The plain and simple, we learn this in law school, contracts, year one. What is the equitable remedy for breach of contract? It's rescission.
Yes.
You get out of it. The federal government, the national government that the states in good faith created and ratified, breached its contract. It threw off everything it agreed to. The proper remedy is rescission. When the states tried to do this, and they did so lawfully, the federal government released its military might, broke every other agreement, incorporated therein, and now indoctrinated us to the point where even conservatives say Lincoln settled it. So if the spouse that let's bring this full circle now, we have a Stockholm Syndrome abusive relationship. The husband, when the wife finally wakes up and tries to leave, beats her relentlessly, murders her family, burns down her house, kills her animals. She says, fine, I'll come back. And just in case she gets uppity again, he keeps a gun pointed to her head. That's what we are living under.
I'll tell you, folks, that is probably 10 minutes of the best commentary you'll hear today, this week, probably this year from Suzanne. She just perfectly summed up the situation we find ourselves in. And then the question always circles back around. Are you going to do anything about it? You're just going to listen to the Mark and Suzanne show?
I'm going to vote with a Sharpie.
That's right. I'm going to vote really hard this time.
Wait, we're going to keep that Republican seat in Utah, folks. We got Mitt Romney as our senatorial Republican nominee. And, you know, for the people that are out there saying vote Republican Party all the way down the line, we've got a guy out here. We had Craig Bowden that was running in the Libertarian ticket. He stopped his campaign. Tim Alders, he's, I believe, from the Constitution Party or American Independence Party. You know, he's a good guy. And you hear people now saying, you're just a scumbag. Thanks to you, a Democrat's going to win the House. You know what? Perhaps maybe the Republican Party will finally learn its lesson. If somebody keeps selling you crappy cars, or you go to a restaurant and they serve you food that makes you consistently ill every single time, why do you continue to go?
Right.
Why do we keep buying into this notion that we only have this binary option here? You know what?
You,
the Republican Party needs to lose, and lose big,
sure,
or it's going to keep going the way it's going. Go ahead.
And the reason we do that, Suzanne, is what I addressed in the beginning of the show. The GOP, the evil GOP, has been so clever, it redefined what winning is. And so most people now say, well, the most important election of our lifetime is upon us right now, and we've got to get the GOP back in control because, yeah, we have every 2 years, every 2 years, the most important election of our lifetime, and people never look at the irony of that, and this is all because the GOP is not that dissimilar from the DNC folks. They both want big government. They both want powerful government. They both want endless wars. They both want privacy violations. Neither one of them, one advocates for the murder of the babies, and the other one lies about it, saying they want to stop it.
And continues to pay for it.
Yes. And so, folks, they have been just as evilly clever as the DNC to you. They have victimized you by redefining what winning means. Winning means getting the GOP in control. Really? Folks, this is, again, I want to ask you to step back from your emotions related to Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, whomever. It doesn't matter who the R is. Step back from your emotions, press them down, just settle them down, think with the mind God gave you, and ask yourself again, where are the great conservative victories? And if you think the GOP is a victory, then you have been brainwashed. You have just been told to think that way. You have been told to listen to the lying spouse, because next time they're going to get it right. They're going to do it right next time. And then there's the next time, and then next time. And they never actually get it right until you get to the Stockholm Syndrome, where you actually become sympathetic to them. You actually start willingly embracing their lies, because you know it's a lie, but it just seems better than the other lie of the Democrats. That's not winning, folks. That is playing their game. I'm going to do something here that I started to work on this morning, and I'm going to give a 7-step process that we are engaged in right now. This is going to get refined, but it's just off the top of my head this morning. Somebody asked me, what am I supposed to do? And I wrote back to the person and I said, listen, there's a process going on. These things always work through a process unless some big event triggers another approach to this. But in the context of where we are going and what we're trying to do here, both at the Cerberus Radio Network, what I'm trying to do through Free the States, what Don Livingston is trying to do through the Abbeville Institute, what Brian McClanahan is doing through the Brian McClanahan Show, and on and on and on, all these other people that are trying to get you to challenge your status quo thinking. This is always part of a process. And here's how I'm describing the process. Agitation needs to happen to bring about rethinking. So what do Suzanne and I and Jeff really do? We agitate. We get on the air and we shake the tree. We say the tree is not good. Let's see if we can shake people from it. And so we say provocative things. Suzanne calls the Constitution the holy parchment. Now, for some people, you get angry. You probably at times, you've tuned back in, but you've probably at times clicked the stop button. Who does that woman think she is? And you'll go, because you've been trained to think that. You've been taught to think that when somebody dares question the status quo, they're the problem, not the status quo. You've just been taught to think that way.
Mark, so you know how many friends I have lost when after that, the 10th Amendment Center published my article, Church of the National Government.
Yeah.
That was the most provocative piece I've written. I lost a lot of friends over that. And again, if only we would get upset about the weakness and spinelessness of the Republican Party in particular, as we are about some football players kneeling for what I call the national hymn. Oh, you're so disrespectful. Who ever said they had the authority to come up with the only meaning for what the protests could be. And the only reason you're going to kneel for the national hymn is because you are disrespecting the military. That's what they do. I have been at our county fair out here, and this was right after Comey laid out ironclad case for prosecution of Hillary Clinton and then said it wouldn't be fair. Now, I came to the conclusion we are in a banana republic right now. Now I'm at the county fair, and they're showing a local from Colville who was killed in, somewhere over there in the sandbox. Please stand to honor this fallen hero. The United States government is hiding behind the people they sent to their demise. Don't fall for it, folks.
Yep. And this is the passion it needs to have so that you can have clarity of thinking. So agitation brings about rethinking. So when you're properly agitated, like you're being today, you're going to stop, and at some point, those people that befriended Suzanne are going to come back around. They're going to, I guarantee they're going to click back on her page and start, because something she said resonated with them. Yep, that is actually true. And they know in their inner being that I may not like what she said, but I can't defeat what she said. Well-meaning, logical, well-thinking people always come back around. They just get through the emotions of it, of being agitated. Then rethinking leads to education. Okay, well, now if I think she might be right, I better know why she's right. So you start reading books. You start doing some of the things we ask you to do here on the Mark and Suzanne show, buying the book and actually reading it. Don Livingston's book, Rethinking the American Union for the 21st Century. Reading Kevin Gutzman's books, The Making of America, reading the Politically Incorrect Guide to the Constitution, reading those things.
That was a game changer for me.
Wasn't it?
It was, because it really made sense. Also, my good friend Dave Benner, if you really think that the corporation doctrine is justified, what I need you to do is go David Benner. It's the 14th Amendment and the incorporation doctrine. I tried to hammer this in the heads of the minds of people, for instance, of national reciprocity. And what I keep getting is, no state, no form of government has the ability to infringe upon our rights. Therefore, we're going to run to the federal judiciary because they've been such jealous vanguards over firearm freedoms. Even Antonin Scalia, again, our sacred originalist conservative justice, paid homage to ratification records, but then said, I'm going to go about and come up with my own conclusion anyway. I'm going to disregard what I just paid lip service to. And folks, he's the gold standard. He's the one they compare when we're looking for a new candidate. Oh, we need an originalist like Scalia. No, we really don't. I kind of want someone more like Sam Adams and Patrick. And by the way, if this was a divine experience in Philadelphia, why did people like John Lansing and Robert Yates run back to New York and tell Governor Clinton, this is a bad idea?
Yeah. No, and this is it. So we agitate to cause you to rethink, to pause and examine your current paradigm that you're thinking through. If you do that, then that will lead you to actually learn a new paradigm and be able to question the very things we say on this show. Education leads to anger. Eventually, that's where we all get. I don't know anybody who didn't get to anger who said something like, why didn't I know this before? Or why didn't people teach me this? Why am I 50 years old? I'm almost 60 now. Why am I 50 years old and just figuring it out now? That leads to a kind of anger. Well, anger leads to changing your opinion. Suddenly your opinion changes. It's like, well, I'm dummy me. I didn't know all this. I do now, though. Now my views are different. Changing your opinion leads to new strategies and tactics. Well, now that my opinion has changed, how do I advance my opinion about this? New strategies and tactics lead to organizing. Well, this is a big problem needing a lot of people. I better start finding people that share my ideas, my opinions on this, and then eventually organizing leads to action. Okay, we're all together. We all agree on this. We know who the enemy is. We know what to do to fix it. Now we have to act. I wish we were at that point. We're not at organizing yet.
No, what we're hearing right now is what better solutions do you have? Or, find a place that's better than America. Right now, yeah, I think we still are the best that's going out there. But
sure.
Do we really want to look to China for our standard of behavior? Well,
Right.
go to China if you don't like it. I shouldn't have to.
Right.
I didn't ruin this. I realized I worked diligently through law school, through my undergrad years at UCLA, through my entire education leading up to that to get good grades. And what was I doing? I was regurgitating the lies. And you are rewarded for regurgitating these lies. You are rewarded for finally memorizing the Pledge of Allegiance, which was written by an avowed socialist, defrocked minister, with the sole intention of indoctrinating impressionable American school children to the benefits of a big government. One nation, indivisible, is the antithesis of what was proffered and accepted when the Holy Parchment was ratified. Folks, we have become so conditioned into thinking that we cannot possibly decentralize. What happened when Russia decentralized? I don't think they've been reduced to ashes, have they, Mark?
No, they haven't, folks. And so we are either entering into a new morphing of communism, and we better stop it now. We are either entering into whatever that means. I don't think it turns into a Soviet Union kind of mentality, but what I do know about the Marxist-Leninists is that they are willing to kill a lot of people. And they are willing to do things that you're not willing to do, that I'm not willing to do. So within the context of where we live, and it is, as Suzanne mentioned, it is the best place on the planet right now, but it's quickly descending into becoming potentially the worst place. Folks, we have got to stop this. Do not let your ability to go to McDonald's today and get a quarter pounder, or go to Regal Cinema today and watch your movie, or go to Olive Garden and get unlimited breadsticks deceive you into thinking things are not changing. Look at the stuff that's out there now. They have everything in place. And Suzanne actually summed it up exactly right. Trump is merely a pause. Now, I like a lot of things he's doing, and he's bought us time. If we squander this time thinking that somehow November 6th and getting the House back in control of the nutcases there means victory, if we squander this potentially maximum 6-year speed bump, if we squander this, we are fools. We have a chance, not because I think he's going to lead it, not at all. But here's what he has somehow become, a kind of impediment to what Hillary and the Marxist-Leninists wanted to do. And they think they're close, and they actually are very close to locking the whole thing up, because they have all the legislation in place. You just now need the executive with the bully pulpit to run around saying Christians are committing acts of anti-discrimination. And their speech might even be hate speech. But once the executive using their bully pulpit says that, all kinds of legislative machinery goes into work. And now, before you know it, Christianity is driven underground, because most pastors are not courageous. Most church members will fold like a cheap suit. They're not going to defy a government saying, you now have to tone down your language. We'll typically comply. Christians are very compliant people. And so we
Mark,
got a little pause
Bible
here.
Study meeting where I was even told, because of Romans, keep paying your taxes, even if they're used to kill babies, because God will sort it out at the end. We have to look at what the Democratic Party has become, by the way. Traditionally, I remember growing up, I would think of the Democrats as the coal miners, as the blue-collar workers, the salt of the earth kind of people, hardworking Americans. That has gone, they've been thrown under the bus. We saw that with Hillary Clinton, with Obama, and with the coal industry. They've been co-opted by intellectuals, pseudo-intellectuals following these people, Antifa, and the globalists, environmentalists, who have thrown their traditional Democratic base under the bus. We're getting to the point. Have they overplayed their hands? Possibly, but this doesn't mean we should go for the red wave. We need to go for the decentralization wave. We're about out of time. I want to thank you for listening to us. We do have solutions, the first of which you must educate yourself. Go to Free the States. There is a revival of secession and nullification symposium in Dallas put on by the Abbeville Institute November 10th. There is still space available. Follow the 10th Amendment Center. Read articles from FEE. Read articles from Mises. Folks, educate yourself. Have these conversations before it's too late. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jeff. This has been the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.